Diversity is profitable for business. Teams that are ethnically and culturally varied likely perform better than their white male counterparts. That's according to a McKinsey report. Nevertheless, Black people, people of color, and indigenous groups continue to be discriminated against, especially at work. Here in Germany, for example, 1 in 5 people of color say they've experienced racial discrimination in the workplace. In the US, that's up to nearly a quarter, and the figure is even higher in the UK, where 41% report experiencing racial discrimination at work. For people of color, racist jokes, stereotypes, bullying, and harassment often become part of their professional experience. Now let's have a look behind these numbers that we just saw. We spoke to Alpha Dia, who's originally from Senegal, and we asked him about his experience of working in Germany.
Alpha Dia comes from Senegal. He now lives in Hamburg, where he works as a model. He says he's experienced repeated discrimination because of the color of his skin, like when he wanted to go to a club with friends. They always said, no, no go. That was brutal for me. We didn't even have a chance. And even if we did, it fell apart when we had to show ID cards. We had special ID papers, and they always said no. He's also had problems with prejudice in his modeling work. Sorry, but unfortunately, we don't have clients for you. Or, you look great, but try New York. And I say, hey, I'm here in Germany. I did my schooling here, and I want to be successful here. And these were such blatant moments, realizing that there were limits to my career and my future because of my appearance. Alpha Dia sees this as racist exclusion, and he's not the only one. German society may be diverse, but anyone with a different skin color or who wears a headscarf is likely to experience racism sooner or later. That goes for Berlin and the whole country. One researcher says that 90% of the respondents see racism in Germany as a problem. Those who belong to a minority are usually speaking from experience. The numbers speak for themselves. Racism is not a marginal phenomenon, but one that affects society as a whole. Schools, the police, labor, and housing are some of the primary areas affected by racism. But help is available. There are dozens of resource centers in Berlin alone that are publicly funded. Reach Out is just one of them, offering psychological help. It's always the case here that people are traumatized by racist attacks. They're traumatized by racial hostility. And that, in turn, causes physical problems. People can't sleep, and they are constantly afraid. Aid workers, politicians, and scientists all agree. Racism is not an individual problem, but a structural problem.
Joining me now to talk about tackling racism in the workplace is Professor Lawrence Lang. He's a diversity trainer and human rights advocate. Hello, Professor Lang. As we just saw, Germany still has major problems with racism in the workplace, and that's despite the country becoming increasingly racially diverse. What are the stumbling blocks here?
Racism continues in Germany because very long the German nation, but also many companies, have neglected the reality of diversity and migration in this country. They have perceived Germany as a quite homogeneous country, and therefore all diversity policies have started very late. More than 30 years later than, for instance, the United States or England, we got proper anti-discrimination legislation regarding the workplace. What we also see as a continuing problem is that racism is perceived as something of a problem of the United States, of England, of other countries, but not something which is here in the midst of our own development and being.
Mhm.
And I think last but not least is this conceptual idea that racism has nothing to do with the workplace, but it's a political problem, which is something people face outside the workplace, because in the workplace it's all professional and we see people only for their competencies, which is not true.
Yeah, now you mentioned companies and the workplace. Here, you offer workshops for businesses like Deutsche Bank, for example. What does your work with these businesses look like concretely?
Yes, I offer workshops and seminars and keynotes for businesses in Germany. I'm now on the verge of producing a training video for all employees of the Deutsche Bahn regarding racism. I worked with Volkswagen or Deutsche Bank and others. What we do, we try to make people aware how racism works, that it's part of the daily routine and the life of those people sitting next to them in the office. We help them with strategies, how to support others, but also avoid racism, how to interact, but also creating a forgiving atmosphere when racism happens. Because what's often forgotten, racism very often is not brought into the world by convinced racists, but by people doing honest mistakes. And we help these companies to find ways of working around them. Just yesterday, I offered a training specifically on language and racism, talking about how certain frames, termini, certain ways to speak about ethnic minorities hinders people to strive, to feel welcome, and feel accepted inside the workplace they're at the moment.
Do you think racism can be unlearned? And if so, how?
Yes, racism can be unlearned. What's very important is to accept that all of us in Western societies have learned racist ideologies and ideas. Sometimes they even are quite harmless. For instance, the conceptual idea that all Black people can dance or all Black people are fast. But in the end, this idea of us being good dancers and fast runners reduces Black individuals to their bodies and therefore makes it more likely for them to be hired in hardworking labor jobs, but not in jobs where you need to use your mind, because the same stereotype also tells us they're less intelligent. So accepting that we have learned stereotypes is the first step. After that, it's important to unlearn racism by moving away from these stereotypes, but also by supporting people who are affected, installing quotas against discrimination in your companies, making sure that people of different backgrounds are hired, installing religious sensitivity
Thank you
trainings,
so much,
allowing your
Professor Lang.
Muslim employees to fast, or etc.
Thank you for these concrete tips.